Have you ever wondered why the raspberries at the farmer's market are always so huge, juicy, and sweet, while the ones in your own garden often stay small or the bush barely bears any fruit? What if I told you that you've probably been doing everything wrong up until now? Welcome back, dear gardening friends. Today we are talking about a topic that almost everyone approaches incorrectly, the raspberry harvest. I promise you, after this video, you will be harvesting raspberries by the bucket load. Your bushes will be so full that the branches will barely be able to support the weight of the berries. And the best part, you don't need any expensive chemicals from the hardware store to achieve this. All you need is a single glass of a very specific, almost magical mixture that you apply directly to the roots. It sounds like a paradox that such little effort should have such an explosive effect, doesn't it? Many gardeners swear by expensive synthetic fertilizers, but the truth is quite different. Be sure to stay tuned until the end, because I will not only show you the exact recipe, but I will also reveal a secret about soil composition that the gardening industry would rather keep to itself. Are you ready for the biggest harvest of your life? Then let's get right into it. Before we get to our miracle cure, we need to briefly understand how the raspberry actually ticks. The raspberry, or Rubus idaeus, is actually a forest plant. It originally comes from the sparse forests of Europe and Northern Asia. In its natural environment, it grows in soils that are extremely rich in organic matter, nourished by years of decaying leaves and fallen trees. This is the historical context that we must never forget. The plant is programmed to grow in a very nutrient-rich, loose environment. When we plant it in our often depleted, compacted garden soils, it quickly loses its vigor. After 2 or 3 years, the berries suddenly become smaller, the leaves paler, and the yield shrinks to a minimum. Why does this happen? Because the raspberry is a so-called heavy feeder. It extracts all the essential minerals from the soil in a very short time. If we do not return these nutrients in the correct biological way, the bush simply starves. Our goal, therefore, is to recreate exactly this humus-rich forest environment on a small scale, using an extremely concentrated nutrient boost that is immediately available. Let's first clear up a widespread misconception that drives many garden owners almost to despair. When it comes to caring for raspberries, an incredible number of people still believe that more water automatically means more and, above all, larger berries. This is a gigantic myth that, in the worst case, can cost you your entire harvest. Imagine you are incredibly thirsty and someone forces you to drink 5 liters of water all at once. That is exactly how the delicate roots of your raspberry bushes feel when you mercilessly drown them every day. The plants literally panic. The fine root hairs, which are actually responsible for absorbing nutrients from the soil, rot in the wet earth because they no longer get any oxygen. A perfect example of this is my neighbor's garden. He held the hose over his raspberry patch for hours every evening. The bitter result? The leaves turned yellow. The few blossoms simply fell off. And in the end, there was only a handful of tiny, extremely sour berries hanging there. The plant spent all its energy trying to survive in the mud instead of producing sweet fruit. Therefore, golden rule number 1 for an explosive yield is, raspberries need moist soil, but absolutely no waterlogging. If you avoid this first and most important mistake, you have already laid the foundation for the moment when our magical glass comes into play. Because only healthy, breathing roots can absorb and process this ultimate nutrient boost in the first place. Let's now move on to the fascinating soil chemistry behind a true record harvest. What exactly does your raspberry plant require to literally explode with fruit? The answer lies in 3 essential elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But that's not all by a long shot. Raspberries are little divas when it comes to trace elements. They literally crave magnesium, iron, and calcium. If you use normal garden soil, these reserves are completely depleted after the second large harvest at the latest. The soil is exhausted. And this is where the second big mistake happens. Many gardeners now simply reach for the cheapest blue granular fertilizer from the hardware store. While this provides a quick nitrogen kick, it causes the plant to form huge, weak shoots that snap at the first gust of wind. The berries themselves often remain watery and lack flavor. We need something completely different. We need a catalyst that brings the soil back to life. Think back to the forest floor we mentioned at the beginning. This forest effect is created by microorganisms in the soil. If we simply fatten the bush chemically, we kill exactly these important little helpers. So we have to find a way to feed the plant and stimulate the soil life at the same time. This is exactly where our method comes in. We don't just feed the roots, we wake up the entire soil. And with that, we reveal the secret of the first main ingredient for our magical glass that will revolutionize your harvest. It is a substance that is produced as a waste product in almost every household, but is pure gold for raspberries. Pure, untreated wood ash. But why ash of all things? It might sound strange to sprinkle burned wood on healthy plants, but nature shows us how it's done. Think of forest fires. After a fire, the new greenery sprouts from the ground with an incredible, almost uncanny vigor. This is because wood ash is packed with potassium, calcium, and phosphorus. Potassium is the absolute key to huge sugar-sweet berries. It makes the fruit firm, aromatic, and ensures that it doesn't mold right on the bush. Calcium, in turn, strengthens the cell walls of the branches so that they can even bear the immense weight of the upcoming record harvest. However, there is an ironclad rule here. Never use ash from painted wood, briquettes, or coal. That would poison your plants. We need pure ash from natural wood, ideally from deciduous trees from your own fireplace or a cozy campfire. This ash is the foundation, the inexhaustible nutrient depot for our raspberry bushes. But ash alone is not enough to trigger this explosive growth spurt. We have to unlock these nutrients for the plant. Now comes the most ingenious part of our secret recipe. To prepare the nutrients in the ash so that the raspberry roots can soak them up like a sponge, we need a biological activator. And you won't find this in the garden center, but in the supermarket in the baking aisle. Simple, fresh baker's yeast. Yes, you heard that right, yeast. It might sound completely crazy, but yeast is the ultimate biostimulator for your garden plants. When yeast becomes active, it produces B group vitamins, valuable amino acids, and so-called phytohormones. These substances act like a massive energy drink for root growth. A fantastic example of this is baking bread. Do you see how the dough doubles in size thanks to the yeast? We induce a very similar, almost miraculous reaction in the soil. The yeast extremely stimulates the soil bacteria. These bacteria literally pounce on the organic remains in the soil and decompose them in record time. This makes the earth wonderfully loose, warm, and rich in nutrients. When the active yeast cells meet the minerals in the wood ash, a perfect symbiosis is created. The yeast prepares the potassium and phosphorus from the ash in such a way that the plant can absorb them immediately and without any loss of energy. It's as if you were not only serving the food to the raspberry, but also pre-chewing it for it. Now let's prepare the magic potion together. The preparation is child's play, but requires a little tact. First, take a large container, e.g., a clean bucket that holds at least 10 liters. Pour in exactly 1 liter of lukewarm water. The water must under no circumstances be too hot. Otherwise, you will immediately kill the important yeast cultures and all the effort will have been in vain. The temperature should be like a pleasantly warm baby bottle. Now add 100 grams of fresh yeast to the lukewarm water. Crumble the yeast slightly with your fingers so that it dissolves better. To start this biological engine now, the little yeast fungi need food. Therefore, add exactly 3 tablespoons of normal white sugar. Stir the mixture thoroughly until the sugar and yeast have completely dissolved. Now comes the part where you have to show patience. Place the bucket in a warm spot and let the mixture rest for about 2 to 3 hours. You will see a thick, bubbling foam slowly forming on the surface. This foam is the sign that the process is in full swing and the microorganisms are growing explosively. This step is essential. If you use the mixture too early, you will miss out on the incredible power of this biological activation. As soon as our yeast sugar mixture is vigorously foaming and working, we add our second miracle element. Add exactly 3 large cups of our clean wood ash to the bucket with the active yeast solution. Stir everything very carefully. You will notice that the mixture now becomes a little darker and perhaps even foams up a bit more. This is the perfect chemical reaction on a natural basis. The acids produced by the yeast now immediately begin to break down the hard mineral compounds in the ash. Now fill the bucket with 9 liters of water so that you get a total of 10 liters of our fantastic concentrate. But beware, do not pour this directly onto your beloved raspberries just yet. A common beginner's mistake is to get started right away. This power broth now needs to mature. Leave the bucket in a shady spot in the garden for another 24 hours. It is best to place a cloth over it so that no insects fall in. During these 24 hours, the real magic happens. The yeast, sugar, water, and ash combine to form a highly complex nutrient solution that outshines any artificial fertilizer by miles in terms of effectiveness. When you take the lid off the next day, you will have liquid garden gold in front of you. Now things get serious. We come to the rule that gave this video its name: one glass under the root. This is the moment when most mistakes are made, because many gardeners think more is better. Please resist the urge to dump the entire bucket onto a single bush. Our prepared concentrate is so incredibly powerful that it would simply burn the fine roots of your raspberries if you apply it undiluted. It's like a hot chili sauce. A few drops refine the meal, a whole bottle completely ruins it. So take a normal watering can that holds about 10 liters. Fill this watering can almost completely with perfectly normal, ideally stale rainwater. And now take exactly one standard water glass, which is about 250 milliliters of our prepared ash yeast concentrate, and pour it into the watering can. Give it a quick stir, that's all. This highly diluted solution is the absolute maximum amount of nutrients that your plant can safely process at one time. You have now obtained enough material for a whopping 40 watering cans from your one bucket of concentrate. You can fertilize half a plantation with that. This frugality and extreme efficiency make our trick so incredibly valuable for anyone who loves smart gardening. We now have the right mixture, but the how and when are just as crucial for the gigantic yield. The perfect timing for this miracle fertilization is extremely important. You can't just dump this fertilizer on the ground at some point in the summer. The absolute best time of the year is late spring, exactly at the moment when the raspberry bushes start to form small white flower buds. This is the phase in which the plant decides how many berries it will produce this year and how big they will be. At this stage, it is the hungriest. If you come along now with our magical glass, you give it the fuel for a real explosion. A second excellent time is about 2 to 3 weeks later, when the first small green fruits form from the blossoms. Please do not apply this solution anymore once the berries are already turning red. At that point, it will no longer benefit the harvest, but will only stimulate leaf growth. And another pro tip: never water in the blazing midday sun. The water evaporates too quickly, and the nutrients remain uselessly on the dry soil surface. Wait until late afternoon or early evening, when the soil is still slightly warm from the day, but the sun is no longer burning. The root's readiness to absorb is at its highest. Let's talk about the watering technique, because here too you can double the effect of our magic potion or almost completely ruin it. Never pour the contents of the watering can directly on top of the base of the plant, where the stems come out of the ground. That is a fatal mistake. Raspberry roots spread very far and shallowly in the soil. The most active roots, which soak up the water and nutrients, are usually located at the so-called drip line. Imagine it is raining. The leaves of the bush direct the water outwards. Exactly where the water drops fall from the outermost leaves onto the ground is this magical ring full of fine feeder roots. Take a small hoe and draw a small, shallow trench in the earth exactly in this area, about 30 centimeters away from the main stem. Now slowly pour the diluted solution from your watering can exactly into this small trench. Wait until the soil has completely absorbed the liquid. Then simply push the soil slightly back over the trench. This ensures that our liquid gold gets exactly where it is immediately needed and processed, without valuable drops evaporating or running off. This precision will pay off incredibly in just a few weeks. What happens in the plant now after we have put this one glass under the root? The results will amaze you within the first week after application. The transformation is visible to the naked eye. First, you will notice that the color of the leaves changes. They transform from a light, perhaps somewhat tired green into a deep, rich, dark green. The leaves become fleshier and larger because they are now perfectly supplied with nitrogen and trace elements. Then comes the flowering phase. Where normally perhaps 5 or 6 blossoms hang on a branch, there will suddenly be 10, 15, or 20. The yeast has stimulated cell division to such an extent that the bush switches into absolute production mode. Once the insects have done their job, the growth of the fruit begins, and this is where the potassium from the ash shows its full strength. The berries will not only develop incredibly quickly, but they will also reach a size that seems almost unnatural. An acquaintance of mine tried this trick for the first time last year. He called me completely excited and said his raspberries were as big as small plums. And the best part, thanks to the optimal supply of sunlight and healthy nutrients, these huge berries will not taste watery, but will be intense, sugar-sweet, and full of flavor. However, there is a massive problem that this explosive harvest brings with it, and you absolutely must be prepared for it. It is the absolute luxury problem of every gardener. The bushes will be hanging so full of huge, heavy berries that the plant will physically no longer be able to handle this load. The branches will bend downwards dangerously far. Without your help, the branches would inevitably break off, which would not only destroy the fruit, but also severely damage the plant for the next year. Therefore, we must intervene preventively. Before the berries get really thick and red, it is imperative that you build a strong trellis. Drive sturdy wooden stakes into the ground at the beginning and end of your raspberry row. Stretch thick wires or strong cords between them at different heights, roughly at knee height, hip height, and again at chest height. Tie the bearing canes carefully but firmly to these wires. This is how you distribute the enormous weight of the harvest onto the trellis. A nice side effect of this measure is that the berries are much better ventilated. They dry off faster after a summer rain, which almost completely eliminates the risk of gray mold or rotting fruit. In addition, you can reach the sweet fruits much more easily during the gigantic harvest. Finally, we need to talk about the time after this incredible harvest. When you have harvested raspberries by the bucket load, the plant has performed at its peak. It is like a marathon runner who has just crossed the finish line, completely exhausted. To guarantee that you will experience such a sensational explosion in the patch again next year, the bush needs care. After the harvest, radically and boldly cut off all the old brown canes that have finished bearing fruit right above the ground. Leave only the strongest green and new shoots standing, which will bear fruit next year. And now comes the secret of sustainability. In early fall, give the plant one more, but really only one more, diluted load from our famous glass. This time, the mixture no longer helps with fruit formation, but strengthens the roots for the upcoming cold winter. The potassium makes the cell walls frost-proof, and the remaining nutrients are stored in the root as a starter pack for the next spring. If you maintain this simple routine, your neighbors will wonder for years why your garden, of all places, looks like a pure land of milk and honey, while they themselves are still harvesting tiny berries. It is gardening in perfect harmony with nature. So let's summarize this little miracle. Who would have thought that the secret to bushes that almost collapse under the weight of gigantic raspberries is so incredibly simple? We have debunked the myth that a lot of water brings a lot of berries. We have learned how to trigger a nutrient explosion with simple wood ash and perfectly normal baker's yeast, which wakes up the soil life and floods the plants with energy. A single glass of this extremely concentrated and well-matured magic potion, diluted in a large watering can, is completely sufficient to multiply your harvest. The size and sweet taste of the berries will absolutely blow you away. Just be absolutely sure to support your branches well, otherwise your bush will literally collapse under its own success. You absolutely have to try this trick this year. You won't believe your own eyes. If this story has changed the way you look at the treasures in your garden, then subscribe to our channel and leave a like. We dig up the history they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon. What is actually your biggest problem when growing raspberries? Do you often struggle with pests, or do your berries simply stay too small? Be sure to write it to me down in the comments.